Hello everyone, welcome to a final video before the season, looking over basically all the numbers so far. So yeah, this is I guess my third video of this kind. This is all about Season 3. There are like Season 2 4P sims in here, but it's not really focused on that. Like you can glean the charts and get a rough idea of how the spec balance works out at the lower levels of tier. But all the builds and so on are assuming Season 3 4Ps, although there aren't really that many differences in builds that I've noticed. What has changed since last? Significant APL improvements, particularly DR single target, and some implementation fixes for explosive shot talents. BM and survival are pretty much unmoved since last time, so those numbers will be pretty static. Also want to address, I guess, the elephant in the room, the allegations, which is, was I sandbagging? Because in the last few days, sims just went up massively. And of course, a week and a half ago or so, I was on maximum stream talking about marksmanship, and I put it quite low because at that time, the single target was like barely around BM, but I always give a small penalty because of movement and stuff. So like if they sim equal, it's generally safe to assume that BM will be better. And then in Mythic Plus as well, we'll even see that later. You know, they look really close, but the logic is BM has more uncapped, it has more prio. There are a few of these tiebreaker things that just seemed more like BM to me. And so my logic was for the tier list, okay, where does BM belong? And I was like, do I put it in A or B? And I ended up putting it in B after talking to the Hunter Discord. Maybe that was too low. Maybe I should have put it in A. I guess we'll have to see, right, coming into the season. Like right now, is BM an A tier or B tier spec overall for across rating and Mythic Plus? I don't know. I don't think it's S. I don't think it's a C. I think it's either A or B. That's what I'm thinking right now. But maybe that'll age horribly as well. But then the problem was, okay, if I don't think, which I didn't at the time, that there was ever any reason to play over BM, then I can't really put it on the same tier as BM, even though I think, even though the numbers are close, it's like, if I don't think you'll actually play it, that has to be a tier lower, right? And the only tier lower than B was the Dobby tier, and this was right after nerfs to which like people hadn't really clocked yet, and it was still doing great overall on keys. It will do great overalls in like medium high keys, and yeah, it just didn't go down so well for me. But I think disagreeing with me is totally cool and all that. I think the main thing that irks me is when it becomes like an attack on my integrity, because I take this stuff really seriously. Probably, maybe more seriously than I should. And so when people say that I'm sandbagging or whatever, or like I pulled the rug or whatever, or trying to get buffs for like, it's just no. Like, this is literally my job. And I know that doesn't inspire sympathy because it's an amazing job and I'm extremely grateful and all that to have it. But that also means I have to take these low stakes WoW things, because for most of you guys, WoW is just a game. It's just like your pastime. Like, you have real lives with real jobs and real high stakes in those lives. And I'm, just sitting here playing WoW, and that's my job. And do I really get to complain about anything? I guess probably not. But sort of where I'm coming from is that I take this stuff as seriously as you take your careers out there. And so the idea that I would sandbag or lie or stuff, that's just like such an affront to my integrity, and it's just not true. It's basically what I'm getting at. Like, I may be wrong about things because I'm just one guy and I have to, I do a lot of stuff for different specs. And, well, I'm just a human guy, right? Sometimes I just get things wrong. But I always, clear about my levels of uncertainty. I always sort of caveat things for this is just how the numbers look. Sims aren't necessarily real life. I default to Sims because PTR data collection is super low quality, low fidelity. So, I'll usually turn to Sims for the final answer. And if the Sims are wrong, then I turn out to be wrong. And then I look, bad. But ultimately, I think the answer to bad Sims is not no Sims or like just winging it. It's like, it's more and better Sims, right? And that's what we've got now. And that's what I'm bringing to you. And that's pretty much the last thing I'll say about that subject. I take this very seriously. I would never lie about anything I think in these videos. If I get something wrong, then I get it wrong, and I'll improve and apologize for that. But I have integrity, or at least I try to have. So for builds for these things, you can find them all on my Icy Hunter guides, all free, all updated for Season 3. also write WoW heads guide for marksmanship. So, but not in BM and survival. Not that those guides are bad or anything. It's just I didn't write them. So, if you want to hear what I have to think, then Icy Veins is probably your best bet. If you have any questions or feedback about this, go to my Discord linked in the description. I'm very reachable, so you can just like join the Discord and just ping me, and you can just be like, "Yo, what's up with this?" or "What do you think about this?" And I'll basically try and answer. I'm quite easy to reach. Here are the single target numbers. Note that this 2-piece and 4-piece numbers are using, like for the old, like these 2-piece plus 2-piece and these S2 4-piece numbers. They are with 684 eye level old tier gear, but everything else in these gear profiles is like 723 bis stuff. So this is not useful for like when should you replace tier. It's just a decent idea of like, okay, if this is my tier situation right now, how do things roughly stack up? But MM is on top, small gap down to BM, and then to survival, and then a bigger gap down to BM. This basically makes MM the default rating spec in my estimation. So even though BM is easier to play and all that, it's not just about the outright damage done, it's also how do they deal the damage. Because BM is basically a completely flat damage profile. You know, you have this 1 minute CD, but it doesn't really burst you that high. MM, meanwhile, is very strong 90-second burst, and it has insane execute damage, meaning damage below 20% HP, and also just damage for the damage amps throughout the raid, where you do increased damage to the boss for like 20, 30, whatever seconds. So MM is massively RNG, as you can see on this massive error bar here, way more RNG than it ever has been. And like, think back to a Gamba sort of MM tier, this is worse, okay? It's the worst it's ever been. Whatever you think of that, some people love it, some people hate it. I don't like it very much, but ultimately, I can't do. If it was equal between MM and BM, then I would say, okay, I'll probably go for the more consistent option. But when the gap is this big, the fact that MM is more RNG, it doesn't really change my general recommendation or any of that. Yeah, that's mainly it. MM has more outright single target and the more useful damage profile as well. BM no multi-shot build is still cool for the raid, but MM can just swap one talent over to trick shots and get a very similar sort of thing and probably do more single target. So yeah, BM is just looking kind of rough in the raid. Can you play BM if all you want is cutting edge, like you're not looking for Hall of Fame? This is another caveat I feel I need to add. Like, I'm coming at this from you want to be the absolute best that you can POV. You don't need to play the best spec in the raid, provided your guild will let you. BM is completely viable. And I always say, define viable. Well, okay, I define viable as like, it can achieve anything that MM can achieve in terms of like in-game achievement. I think you can get Hall of Fame on BM. Even, hell, I mean, I don't think, let's say they raise the world first, they do the kill with a MM. Could they also have done that kill with a BM? Yeah, I probably think so. I don't know exactly how Dimensius looks as a boss yet, but, probably. It's not that huge in the grand scheme of a raid. Like, especially if you're really good at BM and maybe not so good at MM, but yeah. So that's always a caveat worth keeping in mind. Same goes for survival, of course. Survival single target is really good. It's just lacking in the AoE and sort of flexibility department. But yeah. MM is basically the strongest rating spec. Survival is okay for the pure single target stuff. BM is a lower DPS, but it's a nice, flexible, easy to play all-rounder. You can, if you're a raid leader, honestly, just play BM. Don't worry about it. If you don't like MM, just play BM. Don't worry about it. You will be fine. This is not going to kill you. But I'm definitely going to be main MM, and that's basically it, yeah. Next up, we're moving on to Mythic Plus. So this is split into 8-target AoE, and then we're going to look at efficiency. As you can see, BM, MM Sentinel, MM Dark Ranger, very, very close AoE numbers. They're very, very close. Survival is obviously far behind back here, and that just is what it is. Not much to say or do about that. It's just kind of rough to be a survival hunter Mythic Plus these days. So, and here are my efficiency numbers, and I should explain what this means. So this is the average of single target and 8-target AoE performance in Mythic Plus builds. So, and it's also priority target damage. So basically, the lower your efficiency percent number is, the better. Because this means that you are closer as a build to the highest possible build within a certain categories. For example, BM Pack Leader Mythic Plus AoE is the highest AoE build in the whole thing here. So its distance percent on AoE is 0. But its single target percent distance to the highest single target build, which is Dark Ranger single target, is 15.91. And so you just take 15.91 plus 0 in this case, divided by 2, and that's the efficiency you end up with. So that's how I basically evaluate Mythic Plus builds. So before I made this chart, I simmed basically every talent build for every, within reason at least, for every spec. And then I looked at this same chart, but for talent builds instead. So this is the most efficient talent build that I could squeeze out of every possible, spec and hero talent combination. And then I took those numbers and put them into this to compare them all to each other. So what are the conclusions? BM and MM have the exact same efficiency number, and that is mind-boggling insane that is true, given how much chaos there is in the data, so to speak. It's just crazy. As a tiebreaker, BM does have around 7% more prio, so that's nice. But overall, it's going to be a dungeon and comp dependent thing. So I've written down a list here, things to think about when you're choosing between BM and MM. So number 1, BM scales far better into uncapped AoE. Bigger pulls, higher keys where pulls need to be bigger and bigger. BM is probably going to outscale there. But on lower target counts, when you're going a bit more pull to pull and it's a bit more chill, MM is going to do better on that. The second part is the profile of the damage burst. MM AoE burst peaks at 12 seconds in. You only need, 15 seconds, like a single cooldown window, and you're completely fine. BM doesn't have a cooldown window, and if you're starting the first pack, it will take you 27 seconds to reach your peak DPS, and that's because you need to wait for your pack leader bear to come around. Now, if you're starting the pack with a bear, obviously you can peak a bit sooner, but the general trend here is MM AoE just peaks way sooner, and that means that by the time BM peaks, a lot of things will already be killed by the other specs, and so it can appear kind of weak for that reason. Generally, a burstier profile is better. Getting rid of things early is better than getting rid of them late, even if your DPS at the end of the pull is the same. And so MM generally wins this comparison. And burst matters even more on low to medium keys. Weekly keys, I think BM is just not a very good spec for weekly sort of keys, anywhere between 10 to 12s or so. Another element is, BM is often considered the easier of the two specs, but honestly, with how BM plays now, I think it's probably higher effort and quite possibly the harder spec to maximize, because if you want this peak AoE damage up there and you don't want to end up, way down here, you have to multi-dot every barb shot. And BM is extremely fast-paced. You're looking at 35 to 40% haste most of the time in this gear. So with that in mind, and all those barb shots you have to multi-dot, and the fact that you have no cooldowns. The fact that you have no cooldowns essentially means that you never really get to chill, with MM, you pop your CDs, you burst high, and then it still matters that you press the right buttons, but in terms of contribution to your overall DPS, your globals outside of cooldowns matter way less than your globals inside of cooldowns for MM, right? BM, it's you're always on it. You're always in cooldowns. Every global matters roughly equally. And you have to do all the barb shot multi-dotting. It's much more fast-paced than MM. It's hard to keep up with. It's just kind of fast. It's not that complicated or anything, but it's fast. And you have to do all that while multi-dotting. So I think BM is harder to get 100% out of than MM, honestly. So yeah, I think that MM will ultimately be better for most people until relatively high keys. BM will be more of a hardcore spec for very high, very large pull, coordinated and high density keys. The prio damage will also be more relevant there. But I think, if I just had to be if you could only ever play one spec for Mythic Plus this season, I think it would be MM Dark Ranger. I'm definitely playing MM early season myself, and then we'll see if things swing towards BM later on, but definitely starting out as MM. In terms of some MM specifics to think about, so basically looking between Dark Ranger and Sentinel, their efficiency gap is roughly 2.5%, which is honestly not very much. So Sentinel has like 1% more AoE, but then Dark Ranger has like 6% more single target, and then also like 5% more prio. So, just looking at the numbers, Dark Ranger is a little bit better, but it's also a bit more involved to play. Sentinel is a little bit behind, but it's not really, a significant difference. You can play both. I'll play Dark Ranger because I really like the idea of doing more single target. I think boss damage is a hugely underrated aspect. Another thing worth noting here, Dark Ranger is a 90-second spec, and Sentinel is actually a 2-minute spec. And more frequent burst, I tend to like that a bit more than 2-minute ones. But of course, it can, they're close enough overall. I think it can depend on, to some extent, your preferences, but also like your comp, the size of your pulls, the cadence of them, the route, the dungeon. Yeah, I think Dark Ranger is the generic, this is the best marksmanship Mythic Plus thing. It's what I'll recommend in my guides, but you wouldn't be a total moron to play Sentinel in any way, especially if you really like the explosive shot talents, which Dark Ranger doesn't run. It just wasn't efficient when I ran the numbers on that. For survival, it's pretty rough. So flanking builds are roughly 3%, 2.5% more efficient. That's not really all that much, but it's 8% more single target, and then you trade that in for 4% less AoE, but also a lot more prio. Flanking is just straight up more efficient, but I think a lot of people will still play Butchery because people just they just rate AoE numbers higher. But the thing is, the AoE gap between them is not nearly as big as it used to be. So that is worth keeping in mind. I think, I would play flanking if it was a serious key, but also don't think survival is going to end up in super high keys where these differences are make or break. So sucks to say, but that's what I feel. That's pretty much it. This is from the bottom of my heart, this is what I think we're looking at going into the season. If the Sims change, then I'll be wrong. I don't think they'll change, but I didn't think that last time either. So, anytime you're looking at Sims, there's always a caveat. But the answer, if the Sims are wrong, then that will be fixed by more and better Sims. And basically, if things change, if the Sims are improved, you can rely on me to make a video and I'll tell you about it. And I'm happy to admit that I was wrong, because ultimately I'm just looking to be the best hunter that I can be and to teach you guys how to maybe do the same thing. I got this UI thing. It's updated for season 3. It's pretty cool. It has everything you need to play Hunter at optimal level. Do you need it? No. There are other good Hunter Week R packs out there. EX Athena, Public, Lux those. But this one is mine, and I like it. It basically pays for everything else I do. I do this full time, and it's basically a 50-50 split between UI stuff, Patreon, and guide writing stuff. And if I didn't have either, I couldn't do it full time. So so both sort of pay for each other, and the UI helps me. The UI being a sub thing is the reason that I can do this full time and not have to essentially get a real job and then have to spend way less time on the guides and everything, and then everything else would suffer, and then maybe this video wouldn't exist. So if you want to support that stuff, maybe check out my Patreon or Twitch. I'll be streaming the Season 3 launch in EU tomorrow, starting at 8 a.m. EU server time, which is going to be 2 a.m. Eastern. So it's going to be a quiet start, but maybe throughout the afternoon for me, the Americans will wake up and hang out. Or you'll probably be playing the game yourself as well. But that's what will be happening. I'll put up some YouTube videos of basically anything that seems worthy of a YouTube video. But if you really just want all the Hunter information that you could possibly want, like rotations, talent builds, check out my guides on Icy Veins. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you have an amazing season start and that you achieve all of your goals this season. It's a pleasure being the guy to tell you about Hunter stuff. Until next time, peace.